Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. Welcome, everyone. So let's wait just a few seconds. And I'm going, since I'm alone for this session, I just want to check a couple of things. First, if the sound is working perfectly well, can you just drop a comment saying that yes, it works? That would be great. And from that, I'm just going to watch. Yes, so it's muted. All right. Okay, Mohamed. Thank you. That's great. Okay. So it works fine. Perfect. Okay. That's wonderful. Let's wait maybe just 2 minutes or 1 minute before. Just let's wait for more people coming and joining the session. Then from that we can just jump into the concrete things. I would just try to make this session not too boring, getting through the demo of the platforms, like responding to all the questions that can come to your mind, and get something that is interactive as much as possible. Yes. Oh, I know this person, the one that is saying hi. Hello, guys. Good to see you. Nice to meet you all. Okay. Okay, so maybe we can start. And then from that, so for the ones that just missed the beginning, hey, Adam. So the ones that are missing the beginning, they will be able just to rewatch the record. So yeah, let's do it now. Okay, so thanks everyone. It's good to see you here. I can see that there is a lot of people, so that's great. So I'm just quickly about myself for the ones that don't know about me. I'm Romaric, CEO and co-founder of Qovery. I'm a tech guy. So the goal of this session is not to make something that is too boring, but very a concrete and interactive. So I will jump into the demo as fast as possible. But before getting into that, I just want to cover a couple of points just to make sure that we are all the same page. Maybe you are aware and you already know, or you're already using Qovery, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows about Qovery, and then from that we can move on and get into the full product demo. Okay, so the goal of this session is not to covering all the business use case and all the use case and all the things that you can do from Qovery. It's really focusing on how to deploy a production-ready infrastructure on top of your AWS accounts in just a few minutes. And I want to get into also the details of how things work. Okay, so that's the first thing. And there is two parts for the demo. The first part is about the installation, how to set up your AWS account, how you can install Qovery, and there is a second part that is much more focusing on the developer experience, how you can deploy then your application once your infrastructure is ready. Okay, so let's get into that. So the introduction. So I will cover, as I mentioned, what's Qovery, how it works, quickly. Then from that, it's good. The advantages of using Qovery in production. So why it makes sense, why we have built that platform. It's very important, I think, to cover that part. The part one and part two, as I mentioned. Okay, so setting up Qovery on your AWS accounts. So that's the first part. We'll get through the different steps. I will also show how things are spinning up on my AWS account. And the part two, which is the application deployment, how you can, as a developer, once the infrastructure is ready, how you can take advantage of Qovery to deploy your applications and manage all of that. Okay, and then we'll end up the sessions, and that will be the end. So just one thing also, if you have any question, so I have some people from my team that are also in the chat. So just feel free to drop your questions. I will just try to also look at those questions and respond as fast as they can. There is a slight delay between between the time that I'm speaking and the time that I see your message. So if I'm not responding right away, it's just normal. Oh, yeah, I can see like a very old colleague, Richard. Hey, it's good to see you here. Yeah, that's pretty nice. So yes, let's get started. Okay, so just like quickly, what's Qovery? Okay, so Qovery is a platform that is running on top of your cloud account that is really focusing on the infrastructure level of the things and the ability to deploy, like make sure that any developers can deploy their application on their cloud account in very efficient and easy way. Okay, so you know that the job of the developer is to respond to like your business needs, like you're building great applications. When it's the time just to deploy the applications, they just struggle. It's not their job. It's what we call like the job of the DevOps. And Qovery is a platform that makes sure that like engineers, so developers and DevOps engineers works like well together. Okay, so I will get into like those things because it's very important, especially if you compare Qovery to Heroku or other kinds of platforms. Qovery, the thing is that it's not a hosting platform; it's something that is running on top of your cloud account. Okay, so under the hood, we use like Kubernetes to run your workload, your compute workload, and deploy your application. But we make sure that we provide the experience that your developers expect to deploy their application. And we also make sure that as a DevOps engineer, you get still the control and you keep the control of the infrastructure so you can get into how things work. Okay, I will cover those elements, but here the things that you can just keep in mind is that we really provide like an experience that makes sure that developers are like quite autonomous to deploy their application. And in no time, you have like something that is ready and up and running on your cloud account. Okay. I will get back to those points also again during the demo. So I just want to move as fast as possible on those that part. But here, like a couple of advantages of using like positive points of using Qovery to manage like your production and AWS infrastructure is that first, Qovery is a product that is installable on your cloud account in UAC in just 15 minutes. Okay, so basically you can just provide an account, an AWS account, and then from that you can start installing Qovery. Okay, the part that is running on your cloud account and everything that is happening is accessible from GitHub, because Qovery is a product that is half open source. So everything that is happening on your cloud account, you have access to those elements and you can see exactly what happened. Okay, we do generate all the configuration file and you can see exactly what's going on. And something that is also quite important, since we are like AWS ISV partner, is that the infrastructure that we spin up on the cloud account of the customer is really something that has been validated by AWS teams themselves. It's really like state-of-the-art infrastructure that is created. Okay. One of the like advantages of our solution and why customers and so many like companies are using our product to like deploy their application, it's not only the experience itself, but it's the fact that as a DevOps, even if you are like super comfortable in managing the infrastructure, you are super experienced and there is no problem, you know how Kubernetes works and all the different elements on the AWS, is that something that is like quite painful as DevOps is maintaining like all of that, like the maintenance of, so setting up the infrastructure, obviously, but also maintaining that infrastructure over time. That's what we call day one and day two operation. That's something that is fully handled by Qovery, our managed product. So day one and day two operation is just handled by Qovery. Okay, so once you install your infrastructure with Qovery, then you have no effort to do just to maintain all of that and keep track of all the evolution of that infrastructure, the upgrades and the maintenance of Kubernetes, and all of that is really managed by our system. Okay. So I talk about the expense and you will see that, but it's really like a key selling point and key point of our solution. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, you might have seen that I'm talking a lot about the developer experience, explaining how things work on Qovery. It's very important because if you compare Qovery to all the other solutions against that are running on top of Kubernetes, that are like really focusing on the ability to manage Kubernetes, we go beyond that. We really provide an experience that makes like any kind of developers, even the less experienced one, getting into the product, being able to ship their application. You can see the experience that we do provide as Heroku-like experience or Vercel experience as you want on top of your Kubernetes and infrastructure. Okay, and First of all, we do provide like all the primitives that you need, especially when you're DevOps. You need just to make sure that everything is like well setting up and no one is messing with the infrastructure. So we provide airbag control, audit logs, HI, and like so many other things like for the security part. Okay. Since I'm talking about the experience, I must like talk about the way that Qovery integrates into the working environment of our users. Okay, so basically, and I will get through the demo of the platform via the web interface. Okay, but we have different interfaces of control. You have Qovery, you can see it as like a control plane. So Qovery is a control plane, and there is like some articles that will share some resources with you guys just to get into that. But basically, you have different interfaces that can control Qovery. We have a web API, by the way, so you can use our API, but we do provide a web interface, a CLI, and also a Terraform provider, meaning that everything that we are doing from the web interface and what I'm going to show is also doable via Terraform for like infrastructure as a code if you do prefer managing all of that this way. Okay, we do integrate into any kind of CI system. So if you have a GitLab CI, GitHub Actions, Cycle CI, Jenkins, anything, you can just plug those elements and just let Qovery managing the deployment of the applications on your cloud account by plugging it into your CI pipeline, for instance. We do provide direct integrations to Git, so GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket. Let's say you want to deploy your application from that, then it's very easy. You can just plug them and deploy right away. And obviously, since we integrate with CI system, container registries is something we can pull directly images from your container registries and then deploy them into your cloud account. Okay, we'll get through that during the demo in just one moment. Just want to make sure that any question on those elements, or yes, just feel free to ask your question. Then I will jump into the demo right away. Okay, so let's go. Let's get into the demo. And don't forget to rate me like 5 stars if you like the demo. Okay, so here's the Qovery web interface. Okay, as I mentioned, we have different interfaces, but I will just focus on that one that is very visual. But you can manage with Terraform, CLI, the API. You can do it programmatically if you want. We have customers doing that. It's great. Okay, basically, I just want to cover like the part one, which is like the installations of Qovery on your cloud account. Okay, so just first of all, I just want to sign out of the platform. And when you want to get access to the product, you just need to sign up with your GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket account. Okay, it doesn't make any difference actually, because at the end, it's like one single account. You can merge like all those different accounts. Okay, once you're connected, what we ask here, I already have like a bunch of organization, but you can create what we call an organization. An organization is a place where you will manage your infrastructure. Let's say you're a company, you have a project, you want to invite like some team members and manage your infrastructure. You can create that, you can create an organization, and from that place, you can manage all those elements. Okay, it's not rocket science, but once it's done, you can do what we call installing Qovery on your cluster, on your cloud account. Okay, so this is where you click on the left navbar, and here you can just start like installing Qovery on your cloud account. Okay, so here I have already an existing cluster that is running. Okay, but I'm going just to create a new one, a new cluster with you. Then you can see the flow, the complete flow, and we'll check also on AWS that the resources are created in real time. Okay, so let's get started on that. Let's create a new cluster. Okay, so let's name it demo cluster 2, for instance. Okay, so I can set a description, say if it's like a production cluster. It's quite interesting, especially when you're running like a multiple clusters that are like one production, one development. You want to indicate that one cluster is a production one, but not the other one. I will not talk about that, but basically we roll out upgrades of the infrastructure on the development cluster first and then the production. So that's why it's quite interesting just to indicate that it's a cluster, but it doesn't change anything in terms of infrastructure under the hood. Okay. Here you can select, so the cloud provider, today we do support 2 cloud providers, AWS and Scaleway. We are going to provide a GCP as well. We have also another solutions that we are providing that is like install Qovery on your own Kubernetes cluster. I will talk about that later on, but let's focus on AWS first, okay? So AWS as a cloud provider, the region where you want to deploy your infrastructure. So basically you can choose and pick any supported AWS region, so all of them. Okay, so US is 2, for instance, and then set your credentials. So basically we do explain from the documentation how you can get the access key, secret access key. It's not super rocket science, okay? You can follow the full documentations that we have here. We get you through the different steps. We indicate like the IAM permissions that is required just to install your infrastructure and manage all of that. And then from that, once you set up those credentials, we are able just to follow to the next step, okay? Just quickly, here, if you look at the permissions, we ask a quite extended permission. It's just normal. Just keep in mind that Qovery will handle the day 1 and day 2 versions for you, meaning that once you set up and you give those permissions, then Qovery will be able just to run all those upgrades for you. So that's why it's quite extended, but it's also fine-tunable. So you can just like also fine-tune those elements. But then from that, you need to contact also our support just to make sure that you are not messing with the permission. Okay. So once you have set up the access key ID, secret access key, then we can go to the next step. And here it's quite interesting. Okay. You have a bunch of options that you can set up just to install your cluster. So we do propose 2 options first, an EKS one and an EC2 one. So the EKS, you are probably already aware, but EKS is the managed offer of Kubernetes by AWS. Okay, basically it's AWS is taking care of like the master nodes of the Kubernetes cluster, okay, under the hood. And Qovery is just using and spinning up an EKS and installing like all the dependencies on top of that. Okay, it's quite interesting to run production workload. It's definitely like the default options that you should use. In that case, we'll create an EKS one, but we do provide also EC2 instance one, which is much more like cheaper because you don't have the cost of the control plane that is invoiced by AWS, but it's very, very cheap and it's just one single instance, which HA, and for production, we highly recommend using the EKS option, okay? But here it's up to you. You can choose whatever you want. If you just want to try out Qovery, then pick a EC2 instance. You will get the same experience, almost the same experience, because you will not have the autoscaling part, but it's very cheap just to get started, okay? So here I'm going to pick the EKS instance, and here I can choose the instance type that I want to use, okay? So let's say that I want to run like an AMD 64. So I can just type AMD 64 and just choose the instance type that I want to use. If I already know the type of instance that I want to use, then I can just type the name at the beginning of the name and picking that instance. Okay, so here the T3A medium with 2 CPU and 4 gig of RAM. Just quickly, I've already made like a session explaining how to choose the best instances because here it can be a bit confusing. Actually, you have tons of instances that are available on AWS. I will put the link down this video afterwards. But basically, we have a few partnerships that makes you like able just to choose the right instance depending on your real workload on your cluster. Okay, but you can set up, and that's the beauty also of Qovery here. In that case, you can set up a first instance. Okay, start with one instance, and then afterwards you can change and upgrade like that type of instance, like that downgrade or upgrade those instances without any interruption. Okay, Qovery takes care of everything under the hood just to make sure that there is no interruption on the system. Okay, so let's start with the T3A medium, 2 CPU, 4 gig of RAM, the disk size. So here you can choose like a different disk size for your cluster. I'm not going to cover that part, but you can let the default value, 50, it's great. And then the number of nodes that you want on your cluster. So from 3 to 10, you can adapt and adjust like that number. There is no problem. Actually, it's the minimum number of nodes that will run on your cluster, and the maximum. You can go below 3, which I do think for people managing like infrastructure that used to like manage infrastructure, it just makes sense. It's a cluster, so getting below like a 3, you can get like a split brain problem. And you want to make sure that your workload is still like running all the time. So we do force you just to get at least 3 minimum worker nodes, because those worker nodes will be the ones that will run your instances and your application, and we want to make sure that your application are always running the right way, even if there is like power disruption from AWS, network disruption, or any kinds of disruption. One thing that I'm not mentioning here is that those nodes, they are like basically Qovery makes sure that we create, so the region that you have picked, they have at least three availability zone. So an availability zone AZ from AWS is something that is completely isolated in terms of network, in terms of power, in terms of climatization. So we make sure that those ones are spread. So the nodes that you are creating are spread across those different AZ. It's very important just to make sure that, again, your cluster is a state-of-the-art cluster, well configured, and that will be handled the production workload that you are going to run. Okay, so you can adjust the number of nodes afterwards. There is no problem here. I can start with 3, and I put the max to, let's say, 20, and you can change those elements just afterwards as well. Okay, so next, static IP. So it's an option that we do provide. We have some customers that wants to get static IPs because they need to also connect to third-party providers that are just like whitelisting their IP address to connect to their service. So in just one click, we'll do make sure to create the infrastructure that you need with the Elastic IP, NAT gateway, and all of that on AWS just to provision those IP address. And those IP address, that's why it's not built by Qovery, but it's approximately. We do create like a load balancer for those IP address, but also we load balance those IP address. So that's why actually it costs a small amount of money, but we make sure again that it's well done. Then you have no disruption in case of like something goes wrong on your cluster. Okay. The custom VPC subnet, let's say, because Qovery, we create like the VPC security groups, the cluster for you. Okay, so it's very transparent. But in the case where you have multiple VPC already subnets and you want to choose like a specific subnet to assign to that cluster, then you can just choose the ones that you do want. But still, it's an optional option. You can just start with the default one and it will work fine. So here I can just create and install now my cluster, and my cluster is going to be created. So it's as simple as that. So I can watch the logs in real time of what's going on. So it's going to appear in just like a few moments. Okay. And we'll check on AWS what's going on. We just check at the different resources that will be created. Under the hood, Qovery, what happened is that it's creating, so we are generating all the configuration files. And by the way, so the engine that we are using and doing all those steps, they are like, it's accessible on GitHub. Okay, it's completely open source, so you can inspect and exactly see what happened. It's written in Rust. We do generate the configuration file, okay, and we'll apply those configuration files, so the Terraform files, the M charts, and all of that on your infrastructure, okay? We also store those files in your infrastructure, so just in case that you want to see what's going on and what happens, what has been done exactly, then you can do just a check those files. Okay, so let's get back to just quickly. I have the AWS console that is already open. I want to just check. So here I have already my cluster that is running, the first one that I had. So if I go back to this interface, you remember I have two clusters. I have the demo cluster here and the demo cluster 2 here. So the demo cluster is the one that I'm seeing from the web interface. You see, version 124. It's managed by Qovery. It has been created, and all the resources associated are created by Qovery. What will happen is that in just a few seconds, we'll start to see that a new cluster will appear in that interface. Okay, I just want to show you that maybe, so probably like Qovery is creating first the VPC and all of that. I just want to show you that, yes, okay, so that's my existing cluster probably. But what we'll see here is just even before maybe that the control plane has been created is like multiple EC2 instances that will be spin up in just a few moments, okay? So if I go back here, I can just watch the logs. And you will see that in few minutes. So actually, we'll not wait because otherwise we'll just waste tons of time. But what will happen is that we are creating, so first again, VPC, security group, the load balancer, the cluster itself. We make a bunch of configurations on like those elements on AWS, but we do also install the part of Qovery, and basically Qovery install just a small binaries that are running on your cluster. It's written in Rust. It's very low in memory, low memory and low CPU footprint that is running just to connect to the control plane and start pulling tasks to execute and deploy application, basically, okay? I will share an article explaining that part that is available. It's how we build Qovery. It's quite interesting. I cover all those elements explaining how things work behind the scene when you install a cluster, when you deploy an application. Everything is well explained into that article if you are interested to get into more detail on that part, okay? All right. Okay, so we'll let the tasks running in background. We'll come back and we'll see what happened on AWS. I have my existing cluster. I will focus on that existing cluster, okay? Just quickly before moving on and starting deploying my application, I just want to show you a few couple things on the cluster, okay? First, you still have like the ability to manage, as I mentioned, the configurations of your cluster. So if you want to change the instance type because maybe your usage has changed, you are growing your usage, or you are like just downscaling your usage, you can just adapt the instance. It's very transparent. So if I want to move from the T3A to, let's say, T3A large, and I want just to update that, I can just save and redeploy those changes. It will be transparent even for your application, okay? So we prevent any interruption in that case. I just want to focus also on the network thing. So I mentioned that you can choose the subnet and the VPC. So you can do what we call VPC peering. So let's say you need to interconnect the cluster that is created by Qovery, so the EKS one, with another like network on your existing AWS account. You can do what we call VPC peering. Okay, so you can just basically say, hey, that cluster wants to get access to an existing RDS or MongoDB Atlas. It's an external like service. You can do VPC peering in just a few clicks, you see? So it's all explained also in the documentation. It's something that is optional. Usually people that they are coming from Heroku, for instance, they might not use like VPC peering, but for existing customer using AWS, yes, they are aware of VPC peering, and that's something that is useful for. Quickly also, something that I didn't mention because you have seen that it's a wizard process, it's quite limited. So if you are like a DevOps, you are probably asking yourself, oh yeah, okay, but what happens if I want to change something under the hood that is not a default configuration? And this is where comes the advanced settings. Advanced settings, it's like a very powerful feature that makes you able just to change all the default parameters that are into Qovery, okay? We do provide and expose some parameters that you can just change. So let's say we have customers that needs to store their logs on CloudWatch for more than 90 days, like for 1 year. So you can change the value just basically from 90 to 365, and then you will get like all the configuration that will be generated and applied for that case. Because again, that's also something that I didn't mention, but the state-of-the-art cluster is not only the cluster, state-of-the-art infrastructure is not only the cluster and the ability to run workload, but it's all the things that are around. For the security, logs, monitoring purpose, everything is well set up, and you have access to those elements from the advanced settings as well. Let's say you want to change the image retention because Qovery is creating also an ECR container registry that you can get access from the settings as well of this organization. You want to change the retention time, you can change the retention time policy from this AMP, you see? So yes, that's it for the cluster part. I will now focus on the part 2, that is application deployment, but do you have any question from that part? Let's wait just a few seconds. And let's have a drink. Okay. All good for everyone. That's perfect. Just quickly before jumping into the app deployment, I just want to show you the organization settings quickly. If you need to invite your team members, obviously you can invite your team members, set permissions, so let them like access to some projects, the infrastructure that you want, because you can manage, as you have seen, multiple clusters that are running also on different AWS accounts, and you can choose who get access to what from that interface. We have airbag system and so on and so forth. Okay, I will not cover all those elements, otherwise I will need just to get like 1 more hour. But yes, just keep in mind that you can manage permissions very easily from that interface as well. Okay, they are like, by the way, they are Qovery permissions and not IAM permissions or not AWS permission. Okay, it's a layer on top of everything. Just quickly before also getting into that, let's see if something has changed on AWS. AWS, do we have new instances? It's quite slow actually, because the VPC creation is something that takes like approximately actually 15 minutes. So okay, let's wait and come back just later. Okay, we can just move on and get into the application development. Okay, so let's say everything is ready. Okay, and we can now and we want to deploy our application. Okay, you see, I'm not even interacting with AWS. Actually, once you have created the credentials, you put the credentials, then Qovery takes care of everything. You can just focus on the web interface and start deploying your application. Okay, so let's start with a new project. Let's call it, it's not super original, but demo project. Okay, let's call it demo project. Okay. Inside this project, I have the ability to create what we call an environment. Let me explain quickly what's an environment, but let's name it first production environment. Okay, an environment is a place where you can put all your applications that are working all together. Okay, with Qovery, you have the ability to manage microservices, like multiple services, multiple apps that are working all together into one place. It's one entity where you can manage your whole applications that are working for a specific environment. You can have multiple environments. Okay, inside a project, you can have production, staging, development environment. Why it's important is because I'm not going to cover that part, but with Qovery, we have what we call an environment as a service system. Okay, basically you can duplicate an environment in just one click. Okay, it's very important, very powerful for demo purpose, benchmarking. If you are working on a new feature and you do not want to impact the other environments, you can duplicate easily an environment. And that's why we do force you just to choose and create a first environment. So let's say we have our production environment here. We can choose the cluster where we want to run. Keep in mind, you can choose, and this is where the beauty of that is that you can create multiple cluster, production cluster, staging cluster, development cluster. And when you create an environment, you can associate that environment into a cluster, a specific cluster. So here, demo cluster is available. So I'm going to deploy that there. And I can indicate the type of the environment. It's a production environment. The type is useful for the permission because you can associate permission to users on the type of the environment, basically. Okay. So I am going to associate my first applications to data production. So let's create a backend, a frontend, and a database. Okay, let's say it's a Postgres database. So I'm going to click on create a new service, new application, and here I'm going to create my first application, which is a backend application. Okay, so creating an application, you see the experience is quite straightforward. It's just as simple as picking a Git repository. You remember the schema that I had. We are connected. You can connect your container registry, your Git account. So basically, you can deploy your application right from those elements. Okay, let's say I want to deploy my applications from GitHub or GitLab. Let's pick GitLab. My GitLab account, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, so Qovery is scanning now the repository. The branch, so the repository it's a Python application, short URL shortener. The branch that I want to deploy, so I can choose and pick another branch. You can choose the root application path, which is quite useful, especially if you are working as a monorepo. Okay, so if you have multiple services inside the same repository, you can define what's the root application path, where the application is starting from, basically. You can specify the Docker file. okay, of your application. So the Docker file is coming here in that case from my repository, okay, so from the root path, so it's /docker file from that repository. And here I can continue and set the CPU, the RAM, the number of instances, but I will let those default value because I can change them afterwards, okay? So continue, and I can indicate, so the port of my application. So let's say my application is listening on the port 5555. I can say, okay, I want to indicate that port, and I want also to expose that application from outside. So I click on publicly expose, and it's going to be available on the port like HTTPS, okay, HTTPS port. Okay, so I can continue now. And from that, so you have seen now, by the way, I can add multiple ports. So let's say you want to expose one port, but not the other one. You can do all of that. There is no problem. It's well supported. We do support HTTPS, TCP, gRPC, whatever you want. It's working well. So here we are forcing since a few weeks now the fact that the user must define the liveness probe and the readiness probe. It's all explained, and because developers, they are not super familiar with that, but it's very critical just to make sure that the applications are readable as much as possible. Especially when you are losing a node from the cluster, we want to make sure that at least the application that is running is started again very fast, or in the best case, that multiple applications of the same times are running on different nodes. So that's why you can specify the liveness and readiness probe. By default, it's TCP, but you have the choice between exec, gRPC, HTTP, or even disabling that option. Okay, I will let just the default value because in that case, it's not super important. And now from that, I can just click on create and deploy. That's it. Boom. It just works. And what happens is that if I watch the logs, and that's very important, and you will see, and I will just show you how things work, but we have really invested into the developer experience. And when we talk about developer experience, it's the ability to understand what's going on at any point of time, especially when something goes wrong. So from those logs, you can watch what's happening, okay? Here, it's the deployment of my application, basically, okay? So Qovery is cloning the repository, is like building that applications directly and deploying. It will deploy that application on my Kubernetes cluster, but also provide a temporary domain since I've declared that my application, I want to expose it from outside with the TLS associated and so on and so forth. So it will be available from outside in just like a few moments, you see. So I can watch all of that. And once it's done, it will be done. But in the meantime, let's do something, okay? I'm not just going to get into the variables yet. I will show you that you can interconnect the different applications very easily and manage like different options like the domain. I want to add now, let's say a front end and a database, okay? So I'm going to add another application that is front end application. And here, instead of picking even my GitLab account, I'm going to pick a GitHub account. You see, that's the beauty as well. You can have one environment with different applications that are like coming from different sources, from your container registry, from GitLab, from Gitpod. All of them, they are like just bound into one environment. And Qovery is also watching all the changes that you're making on those repository, meaning that if you are updating your code and you want that Qovery automatically redeploy all of that, it will be done automatically. Okay, it's configurable. I will show you that. But here, let's say that I want to deploy also a short URL short node, but it's coming from GitHub and not from GitLab. Let the default value the same. So the CPU, the RAM, we let those default value as well. We also indicate that it's the port 555. Then continue, and create. Perfect. Oh, perfect. And now let's do the same with a database, okay? We have other options, lifecycle jobs, cron job, but I want just to add a database first. So let's say it's a PSQL DB. We have two different modes here. It's quite interesting because if you're running production, you might want to run your database on RDS if it's AWS, which is great because AWS RDS is taking care of like the point-in-time recovery, backups, just the availability of the database. So it's great. You're better just using a managed mode, picking your Postgres, and the version that you want to deploy, if it's private or not. So the network, it's better to make your database privately accessible only. Okay, but you have also another option, which is basically the container mode. In development purpose, you are better just sticking to something that is a container. It's faster to spin up. You have no backup, no point in time recovery, but it's better just for cost reason and also because it's faster just to be spin up. In that case, I'm going to use the container mode, but actually using the manage mode doesn't make any difference. It will be just a RDS instance that will be created, the VPC will be configured, and then you will be able to connect to that database from your application very easy. And Qovery injects automatically the credentials from that database into the environment variables of your application. Okay, so here I'm going to do it this way. So let's set the CPU, the RAM, same, the storage, we can let the default value and just create that instance. You see? So inside this environment, I have two applications, a backend, a frontend, a database. And now if I want to just basically interconnect those elements, I can get into the variables of each application. And what happens is that here you have Qovery that has injected some secrets and environment variables that we call built-in environment variables. And because we are aware that most of the applications are using what we call connection strings to connect to the database, we inject that connection strings as a built-in environment variable. And with Qovery, you can create what we call an alias, okay? Meaning that from your applications, most of the applications, if you are using an ORM or anything else, you might use something like a database underscore URL, environment variable name to connect to that database. So you have those elements. Actually, you see the database URL internal and the database URL. So those ones are the ones that are like injecting the credentials to the connection string from the database, okay? It's linked to the PSQL-DB service. It's a built-in one. I don't want to use that name to connect to my database, that environment name, the key to connect to my database. I want to use a specific alias. And for that, you can create, so click here and create an alias and say that I want to use database underscore URL to connect to that database. There is something that you see here is the scope. You can define the scope of that environment variable, that alias. What does that mean? It means that actually, if you want to create an environment variable and spread it across the different services within the same environment, you can specify the environment scope. If you want to set it just for that service, then you can set the scope of service. If you want to set it for the project, the full project, so all the environments, regardless of like the specificity of that environment, you can specify the scope, okay, the project scope. So here I'm going to specify the environment scope. So it means that every single application from that environment will get access to the same alias. So if I switch from the backend to the front end, for instance, and get back to the environment variables, you can see here I have access to the database underscore URL. But it's a front-end application. You see, you don't need to connect your front-end. See that you can do that, okay? So here, it's quite good. Let's say that now I have my database, so my backend application is connected to my database, so that's great. Let's say that now I want to connect my front-end to my database, and I'm using inside my front-end application an environment variable that is named backend URL. Okay, so what you can do is first again, let's say I can create an alias. So let's say on the backend application here, I have the host external. If I look at the value, the host external is the temporary domain that is associated to that application. Okay, I can create an alias on that one, and let's say that it's a backend underscore host. Okay, again, I will spread across the environment, and let's say it's a backend host. Now, because there is no prefix HTTPS in front of that host, I want to add the prefix HTTPS semicolon / that host, so the backend host. You can use interpolation with Qovery as well. So I can create a variable, and let's say that it's my backend URL variable that I'm using inside my front-end application. I can do https / semicolon / and here I can specify backend, so host, and then Qovery will make sure to interpolate that value. Okay, so I can spread it again to the environment, and it would work well if I'm using that environment variable name, backend URL. You see, so it's very convenient. You can create very powerful combination. We have a system of override here. You have the ability to import even like a .env file or from Doppler. We have an integration with Doppler, and even an environment as variable as a file, which is very powerful feature. If you are familiar with, for instance, with GitLab, GitLab is providing the same feature. Basically, you can just mount a file inside your container with all the elements. It's a very powerful, especially if you want to change a big chunk of configurations from like a container that you're starting. Okay, so all right, let's deploy like my full environment now. And even in the meantime, what I'm going to just watch is the backend application, if you are looking, is like ready and up and running. Okay, so I can open the URL, is working. It's a public URL. I can share that URL with you guys. You will see that you get access to that application. It's running on my AWS account. It's very powerful. And something that I want to show you also quickly is that Qovery provides you all the primitives that you need. We are not saying that Qovery is a product that do everything. You can interconnect, let's say you want to have like a proper logging monitoring solution of observability. You can use Datadog and interconnect Datadog to Qovery. Actually, everything that is running on Kubernetes run on Qovery. There is no problem. You have access to that, and we give you access to all those things. I'm not covering that part because I just wanted to make it short, but just keep that in mind. If you need to install anything on your infrastructure, if it runs on Kubernetes, then it runs with Qovery. That's it. Here, I want to show you that you have access to the logs in real time from your application. So my backend application that is running and I'm connecting to, I can see the logs. So I see the status code to 200 from that URL, from that path. And I see and I can watch the logs. I can even watch the ingress logs in real time. So in just clicking, I can watch those ingress logs in case that I want to debug what's going on and what's going wrong with my application, you see? So you really have access to everything that you need just to get started and start deploying and shipping your application. I'm not going to cover the fact that you can add a custom domain and all of that. Very simple and just like super obvious. But basically, Qovery also, again, like take care of providing the TLS certificates with you. Behind the scene, we do provide that with Let's Encrypt. You're probably familiar with that. It works well. And you also have the concept of advanced settings. So here, if you want to mess up with the ingress controller or change, like, let's say, the proxy size from 100 to 200, you can do that all yourself. And this is where that's the way we give you like the ability to just like get beyond what we do provide again. Okay. All right. What I want just also quickly covering is the ability to roll back quickly. You know that if something is messing up in production, you're running in production and it's going wrong and you want to just roll back to a previous working version, you have in just like a few clicks, you can roll back to a previous working version. There is no problem. It's linked with your Git account. You can even specify the commit ID and just in one click roll back that previous working version. There is no downtime. It's like a rolling update, and you can change even the strategy that you want. Here it's a rolling update, but we have other different options that are accessible from the documentation. Okay. All right. Whew. It's a lot, but we are running almost out of time. Something that is very interesting is the deployment pipeline also. So you can specify the order of deployment of each application. So let's say you want to deploy your backends before your front end, then you can just specify and change the order. There is no problem. The stages are configurable and you can change those stages afterwards. There is no problem again. Okay. All right. So that's it for the demo today. Oh, maybe before we leave, we can check something. Let's check the progress of our cluster. So, okay, still in progress. So you see it takes time, but it's not related to Qovery. Actually, it's related to AWS because the resources that we created Takes time, just time, but it's approximately 25 minutes to be created. So if I go back to my AWS console, okay, if I refresh here, still no resources. Okay, EC2 instances, more instances now. Still no. Okay, so it's going to come, but maybe like after this session. Okay, but it's still in progress and there is no error so far. If there is something that is going wrong, you get the information right from this this interface. We have invested a lot in just making the message comprehensive, like to anyone, even people that are not experienced, just because sometimes you can hit a quota issue or you can hit like a different type of issues. And we try just to simplify the error message as much as possible. Yeah. Oh, Florent. Hello. Okay. Thank you, Florent. Florent is saying that probably you're not in the right version, which is probable. US is 2. Oh, you're right. Oh, you're good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, you're right. Well done. This is where you see like the real professional. I'm just yes, that's nice. Perfect. Yes, that's my cluster. Yeah, very good. It's my new cluster. Yes, exactly. Thanks, Florent. So my cluster is already created actually. So it's applying and it's true. You're right, because what I've seen is that it's deploying, you see, preparing chart configuration to be deployed. So it means that the cluster is running. So perfect. Thank you. All right. So let's go back to my presentation. So if you want to try out Qovery yourself, just feel free to sign up and give a shot. There's like a free plan, no credit card required. You can just like bring your AWS account and try it out. It works well. And I just want to go back to my presentation just to summarize before we end up that session. So just you understood it, but Qovery is something that is installable on your AWS account in just like a few clicks and few actions. So you just provide your credentials, and then from that, Qovery takes care of everything under the hood. Okay, so creating VPC, security group, cluster, the Kubernetes. You don't need to be an expert in Kubernetes to take advantage of the platform. But something also that we really want to push on is that if you're an expert, you're already in DevOps, you have like a platform engineering teams that know about that, but wants to simplify the management of Kubernetes, and especially on the day one and day two operations, then Qovery is definitely like a very good solution for that. I'm not preaching because it's my company and it's my product, but actually we have customers that they are like DevOps, very experienced, even more experienced than me on the infrastructure, that they are using our solution just to really manage, take care of the day one, day two operation, which are like very, very boring stuff. And for all people that are like in this space, infrastructure space for a long time, they know that it's just better to delegate that part. We do focus also like on the experience. You have seen that I didn't interact so much with AWS actually just to check the resources, but you can keep like obviously control of what happens from that interface. We do provide also, and we do generate all the configuration files, and you have access to those configuration files on your infrastructure. We do store them into a S3 bucket. Okay, so it's all explained also in the documentation, but we really want to focus on developer experience and how, as a DevOps guys, if you have a DevOps or not, as a company, you can just focus on building great applications and make sure that those developers, they are like able to ship stuff on their AWS accounts. Usually what we're seeing is that companies, they have like tons of credits on AWS, but they don't have the expertise, or they have the expertise but don't have the time. And at the end of the day is how we make sure that you can just ship your application, and Qovery provides the experience that is expected from all to do that. And one thing also is like Kubernetes, since it's Kubernetes under the hood again, you have access to the whole infrastructure. We do explain from our documentation how you can connect to Qovery, to your Kubernetes cluster. So if you type a Qovery Kubernetes cluster is it's so many things. This connect, let's say, how to connect your EKS cluster with kubectl. So we explain all of that. Again, you have access to your infrastructure. If you need to install nchart on your cluster and so on and so forth, you can do it. That's something that I didn't cover also, that you can deploy Terraform script and stuff like that. It's out of topic for that session. I will make it like a dedicated session, but you can do all of that. Really, it's you have the full power. You're not limited actually. And obviously, we do provide all the things that you need just in terms of security, airbag, audit log, HA. I didn't show the audit log place, but all the actions that I made, actually, you see, we keep track of all of them. You can even filter on a specific time period. So if you want to see exactly what I did early this week, you can choose, you can just filter, and you can see exactly the payload that were like executed. So that's something that will be even like improve over time. My team is working on it, but it's very important just to keep track of what happens on the platform. So from that, you have like a very high view and macro view of what's going on. All right, so here we are. It's I have 5 minutes more for any questions. If you don't have the time to ask your question here or listen to the answer, you have my email address here, or romaric at qovery.com. Just feel free to drop me an email and I will respond to your question. Or even if you just want to drop like your questions like publicly, we have a super active forum that you can use from our customers. So it's really used by our user customers. You have tons of questions, tons of things, but we also have like a great and extensive documentations that you can use. We try to document as much as possible of everything that is happening. We know that infrastructure is very critical. You really need to understand, even if you delegate like some pieces, you really need to understand what's going on. And we do provide you the resources that you need just to really understand it. If there is something that is not covered again, just please drop a message via intercom, via the forum, and we make sure that one of our engineers is responding to those questions. Okay? All right. So I'm waiting just like a few seconds more for any question, and then from that we can just end up the session. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? All right. So thank you, everyone. It was like a real pleasure making this session. I will organize like other sessions. So just like follow me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, just to be aware of like the next sessions. And then from that, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your day. And thanks for staying with me. Have a great day. Bye.